Okay, so we'll just reread the last very powerful paragraph because there's been a little bit of a gap, and then we'll start. So, Yogeshji, would you like to read this one? But the point here
Yeah.
is
But the point here is that the modern mind has exiled from its practical motive power the two essential things, God or the eternal, and spirituality or the God state, which are the master conceptions of the Gita. It lives in humanity only, and the Gita would have us live in God. Though for the world in God, in its life, heart, and intellect only, and the Gita would have us live in the spirit, in the mutable being who's all creatures, and the Gita would have us live also in the immutable and the supreme, in the changing march of time, and the Gita would have us live in the eternal. Or if these higher things are now beginning to be vaguely envisaged, it is only to make them subservient to man and society. But God and spirituality exist in their own right and not as adjuncts. And in practice, the lower in us must learn to exist for the higher, in order that the higher also may in us consciously exist.
not able to hear you.
Uh,
I I was able to hear. Yeah.
Okay, consciously exist for the lower. Maybe there is some problem with my internet connection.
consciously exist for the lower to draw it nearer to its own altitudes.
Right. The main thing here, which he's saying is God or eternal and spirituality or the God state. These are the master conceptions of the Gita. The central importance that it gives to God, the divine, or spirituality, as opposed to the modern mind, uh, which he has described in the first part of these paragraphs. And God and spirituality exist in their own right and not as adjuncts. They deserve their own central importance. They cannot be, they are the central thing in life, they are the primary thing in life. And all the rest has to be organized around these as the basis, not the other way around, that we give more importance to everything else. And we also have a little bit of God and spirituality as necessary or, somewhat necessary adjuncts to life. This is essentially what he's saying. Okay. So we had covered this at length last time. We'll begin by reading the next one. Is that okay? Okay. So Dhaval Bhai, would you read the next one?
Sure. Four. It is a mistake to interpret Gita from the standpoint of the mentality of today and force it to teach us the disinterested performance of duty as the highest and all-sufficient law. A little consideration of the situation with which the Gita deals will show us that this could not be its meaning. For the whole point of the teaching, that from which it arises, that which compels the disciple to seek the teacher, is an inextricable clash of various related conceptions of duty, ending in a collapse of the whole useful intellectual and moral edifice erected by the human mind. In human life, some sort of a clash arises fairly often, as for instance, between domestic duties and the call of the country or the cause, or between the claim of the country and the good of humanity, or some larger religious or moral principle. An inner situation may even arise, as with the Buddha, in which All duties have to be abandoned, trampled on, flung aside in order to follow the call of the divine within. I cannot think that the Gita would have solved such an inner situation by sending Buddha back to his wife and founding the government of Sakya state, or would redirect a Ramakrishna to become a Pandit in a vernacular school lessons, or bind down a Vivekananda to support his family, and for that to follow dispassionately the law or medicine or journalism. My goodness. The Gita does not teach us the disinterested performance of duties, but, but the following of the divine life, the abandonment of all dharmas, sarva dharman, to take refuge in the Supreme alone, and the divine activity of a Buddha, a Ramakrishna, a Vivekananda is perfectly in consonance with this teaching. Nay, although the Gita prefers action to inaction, it does not rule out the renunciation of works, but accepts it as one of the ways to the divine. If that can only be attained by renouncing works and life and all duties, and the call is strong within us, then into the bonfire they must go, and there is no help for it. The call of God is imperative, not be weighed any other considerations. Beautiful.
Right. Thank you. Not too much to explain, but just we'll read it once more. Therefore, it is a mistake to interpret the Gita from the standpoint of the mentality of today. What is the mentality of today? Human centric, society centric. वो सारा जो पहले बोला ना, humanitarianism, philanthropy, and then he says all these are good things if they are the Yuga Dharma. But this is not the right mentality, because these things, everything has its origin and cause in the divine. And to place anything at all, however great it may be, before the divine is a fundamental mistake. This is essentially what he's saying here. सबसे पहले भगवान, बाकी सब बाद में. Okay. And force it to teach us the disinterested performance of duty as the highest and all sufficient law. It's a very important sentence, so I'm just reading it again. It is a mistake to interpret the Gita from the standpoint of the mentality of today and force it to teach us the disinterested performance of duty as the highest and all sufficient law. Anybody who tries to use the Gita or to manipulate or blackmail us into following just this, okay, that also is driven by a higher or some kind of moral reason and all that. So the word blackmail may be too strong, but whatever takes you away, if that categorical, that imperative call for the divine is there in the name of the Gita, if you are being taken away from that and being forced to follow a lower ideal, that is not acceptable. That is not what the Gita wants us to happen to us. Okay. The Gita wants us to realize the divine. That much should be absolutely clear. And as we have said in the previous two sessions, this kind of tendency is quite common. To quote the Gita and to, cite the Gita even without knowing it. Padhta to koi nahi hai. Nobody really reads. People just, say from hearsay. So he is correcting this and he is putting back into place the central conception of the Gita, which is God and the eternal, or spirituality and the God state. All right. A little consideration of the situation with which the Gita deals will show us that this could not be its meaning. Okay? Arjun ko yahi to karna tha. If that is what he is supposed to do, then where is the need for the Gita? There is no need, right? Yeah? For the whole point of the teaching, that from which it arises, that which compels the disciple to seek the teacher, is an inextricable clash of the various related conceptions of duty, ending in the collapse of the whole useful intellectual and moral edifice erected by the human mind. He is not able to decide which duty should he follow. The duty simply that of a kshatriya, of the warrior class, to maintain the dharma, the duty of relative in so many relations to these people, and basically what should he do? He is confused, and therefore simply just do your duty. That is not what the Gita is wanting, and that is why the whole enlightenment is given by Krishna. This is simple enough. इसमें आगे आएगा, but I might as well say it just now. The decision of duty comes from the decision of identity. Okay. If you think that you are simply let's say in Arjuna's case, you are a member of the Kuru clan, okay, then obviously you don't fight your fellow clan members. If you are a Kshatriya, then it is your duty to do this. If you identify yourself as a son or a grandson or a this or that, then so goes the duty. But the question is, I mean, this is the important point why I raise this here. What is the fundamental identity which the Gita gives us? That fundamental identity is that we are a portion of the divine. 15.7. Mamaivamsho jiva loke jiva bhutaha sanatanaha. And when we proceed from this identity, then there is only one goal. It is to become the instrument in the hands of the divine. Initially an instrument, and gradually the union is so perfect that you don't even feel any difference between the divine and yourself. But
Can you
the
repeat?
identity that has to be corrected. Yes, I'll come. The identity that has to be understood. The correction in all the various identities that we have. All the other identities are secondary. I am a human being. This is a secondary identity. Then comes I am a man. Then comes all the relations. But before all this, what is the primary identity? The primary identity is that I am an eternal portion of the eternal. Again, when we say portion, it does not mean that we are somewhat cut up or this thing. We are having that unlimitable, that ananta. Out of that, some of that energy is given to us to function, and in that sense we are a portion. But in proportion as our union with the divine increases, this sense of a partial energy also decreases, and we become more and more capable of feeling the whole universal energy and all that. Yes, Dhavalji, you were saying something.
Can you please repeat that sentence? The idea of duty is that of identity, right?
Yes.
That's a critical statement that you made. So I'm just asking you to repeat. Yeah.
Yes. The sense of duty or the idea of duty will come from the sense of identity. कर्तव्य का निश्चय होगा व्यक्तित्व के निश्चय से. What do you think you are? I should say here, in all honesty, that I first learned this from one of the lectures of Swami Tejomayananda of the Chinmay Mission on the first chapter. Very, very clear, but he's basically saying the same thing. Sri Aurobindo is going to say it in one of the following paragraphs. What is your identity? That is going to determine your duty. Arjuna starts with the identity of a Kshatriya, of a Pandava who has been, some bad things have been done to him by the Kauravas, and so on and so forth, right? But what is the identity that is given to him in the 15th chapter when the Purushottama vision is given, revelation? Mamaivamsho jiva loke jiva bhutaha sanatanaha. You are an eternal portion of me. You are an eternal portion of the eternal. And from that identity, he functions as an instrument of the divine. Obviously, all the other identities continue to remain, I mean, in that sense. But that main identity, that who is he is a divine instrument. As it is, he is a son of Indra and he's a Deva and all that by birth. But he has forgotten that. One does not remember these things all the time. Their remembrance comes only at critical junctures in one's life and manifestation.
Anmol, just one practical question here. See,
Yeah.
if you look at all of us, the fact is that we go ahead because this is the gospel truth. We are on this spiritual path. But if we are that spiritual entity, we are that instrument, even when we try to bring this in our day-to-day existence, minute by minute, hour by hour, the challenge is that the step that needs to be taken, we again fall back onto the human identity, because the communication of the divine one within us is not heard that strongly. I want you to just elaborate that aspect, that how do we inculcate that communication, even if we believe, we assume, we take it forward, because that should then be the driver rather than the identity of the mind-body complex which is driving us.
Correct, correct. So you are right, but I mean, that is the whole process of yoga and how strongly you are following the discipline of yoga. Okay. It depends upon that how clearly you are able to perceive that inner voice. Now, in the yoga practice, what happens mostly and generally to people is that in phases or in certain moments, that inner voice is felt very clearly and strongly. Okay. But then,
Right.
the fumes of the lower nature, they come up and it gets clouded. So that is the whole struggle of yoga. इसीलिए the words yatan, कि yatan मतलब effort. You have to make a very strong effort to continuously try to keep yourself oriented to that deepest reality. That is why it is the greatest of all endeavors. Yoga is not for, I mean, like Sri Aurobindo says, immortality is not a plaything to be given to a child. In one of his letters, he has this very powerful sentence. So you have to make a constant effort. And I mean, whatever effort we are doing, whatever karma we are doing, that is the first step. That is why, the first step is karma yoga. We keep
Right.
offering that. We try to remember that there is such a thing as the divine. I am his, and whatever I am doing, it should be done for his sake, not for me. The answer is basically that effort by whatever means, not necessarily, somebody is saying, somebody is writing karma yoga, therefore whatever works for you, whatever helps you to keep that inner connection, that we have to keep doing constantly. Like mother says, for example, that whatever we gain during the daytime, we lose during sleep. Not all of it, but large part of it, because our sleep is not conscious. So there is a compilation in Shabda, the yoga of sleep and dreams. Somebody, A.S. Dalal, has compiled. So even our sleep has to become conscious, wherein,
Right.
even sleep, we are conscious of the divine, and gradually. So basically, this is what thing about yoga is, that because you are aiming for the highest, divine is the highest thing a man can aim for. So
Right.
this kind of thing that, no matter what I do, I am not able to, the expectations from oneself, they become very high. That how am I not able to listen to the voice? You will. But I mean, but nahi kehna chahiye. From your side, from our side, we have to keep making that effort.
Right. Right.
Idea
Makes
we
sense.
have of goodness, like the soul or psychic being, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. The good, the true, the beautiful. Very simple. So I follow whatever is good. I follow whatever is true. And I seek beauty in everything. If we just do this much, then that keeps the connection alive. And I mean, there is no other way to constantly hear it except to pursue it in earnest. There is no other. There is no shortcut for that, basically. Oh, you have
Perfect.
to
Really
apply
makes sense.
yourself constantly. Satata yukta, to constantly unite yourself with it. So there
Right.
is basically no shortcut for it.
So
Perfect.
Anmol
Thanks.
bhai, An, uh, Anmol bhai and
Haji.
Yogesh bhai. So
Yeah.
one thing, like if I were to rephrase this in different way, like because of in light of the paragraph about duty which you said, the sense of identity. So Arjuna here is actually having an identity crisis, whether to go for whether to serve the identity of his country or to serve the identity of his relationships, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and this crisis, which generally everybody, so basically if we have to rise further, we
Yeah.
have to forget our identity with our other aspects
Yeah. Yes.
gradually and
The
re-establish it with the divine
yeah.
gradually, because this can't be
Exactly.
done. And जीवन में
The
in life,
higher will be the identity, the
हाँ,
more impersonal will be the identity, the more powerful and more true will be the action.
correct, correct,
The more
correct.
narrow is the identity, I mean, to that extent, the power of the action gets limited naturally.
Hmm.
So that is the whole secret. Okay. So, for the whole point of the teaching, that from which it arises, that which compels the disciple to seek the teacher. Okay. Now, in human life, some sort of a clash arises fairly often, as for instance, between domestic duties and the call of the country or the cause. It happened to Sri Aurobindo also. He was married at the time when he finally took the plunge in yoga completely. And all that. To come to that. or between the claim of the country and the good of humanity, or some larger religious or moral principles. And he gives three examples for this. An inner situation may even arise, as with the Buddha, in which all duties have to be abandoned, trampled on. Look at the word. Trampled on मतलब बने कुचल देना. That is the Hindi word for it. कुचल देना बिल्कुल. Just trampled on. Very strong language. Flung aside. Flung is not just throw. Flung is throwing forcefully. Flung aside. In order to follow the call of the divine within. I cannot think that the Gita would solve such an inner situation by sending Buddha back to his wife and father and the government of the Shakya state, or would direct Ramakrishna to become a Pandit in a vernacular school. Vernacular is a local language, and disinterestedly teach little boys their lessons, or bind down a Vivekananda to support his family, and for that to follow dispassionately the law or medicine or journalism. Here I might just say, in the context of Buddha and Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna ka to utna nahi hai that way. Sometimes, this kind of thing which Buddha did, leaving his wife and child sleeping and going. I mean, I'm not saying, but the tendency in the इसके दोनों aspects हैं. So, I mean, probably we should read the whole paragraph and then again come back to this. Maybe the example of Vivekananda can be given right away. So, in Swami Vivekananda's case, when he was around 18 or 19 years of age, his father, Vishwanath Datta, he passed away. And he was such a brilliant student and everything. The natural expectation would be from him to support the family. But what does he do instead? He starts visiting Ramakrishna more and more frequently and basically becomes a monk. Sri Ramakrishna left his body in 1886 and Swami Vivekananda was 23 at that time. So around the time when Ramakrishna leaves, basically after when Ramakrishna leaves his body, he becomes a sannyasin and he becomes a parivrajaka, wandering monk. So, it's totally from that point of view, if you think, okay, what is this? And it's not that he had, I mean, if I have to give an example, I don't remember the exact numbers, but his mother, who used to maintain the household in, let's say, 100 rupees before his father passed away, the figures dwindled by around 10 times. And the relatives and all who were all very, they used to flock around them as long as they were rich and everything. They took away some of the money and things became very difficult. And he had brothers and his mother was there. 3-4 people were there. I don't remember exactly. One brother was working in the Karma Yoga or Vande Mataram, one of the papers of Sri Aurobindo also. Point is to say, such a brilliant man, okay, the social expectation would be to provide for them. You are so brilliant, you can do anything. Whatever he would have touched, he would have, been successful in that. He was a Vibhuti of Shiva. Very great Vibhuti, Sri Aurobindo calls him. So, but therein comes the word imperative, jo word I am just again waiting for it. ये अब sentence है इसमें. The Gita does not teach the disinterested performance of duties. कि बिल्कुल एकदम निरपेक्ष भाव से बस जो मुझसे एक्सपेक्ट किया जा रहा है वो ड्यूटी मुझे फुलफिल करनी है. And that is what the Gita teaches me. No, that is not the case. The Gita does not teach the disinterested performance of duties, but the following of the divine life. One of the most important sentences of this book. The Gita does not teach the disinterested performance of duties, but the following of the divine life, the abandonment of all dharmas, Sarva Dharman. The reference is again to the Mahavakya, 18.66, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, that one. To take refuge in the Supreme alone and the divine activity of a Buddha, a Ramakrishna, a Vivekananda is perfectly in consonance with this teaching. Even Ramakrishna, when he went to Kolkata and he was teaching in that vernacular, his father had passed away. Even his elder brother, Ramlal or something was his name, even he had passed away. So एक responsibility आ गया था. But then the devotion towards Kali and the whole this thing, I mean at the age of 7 or 8 when he saw that cranes passing over that with the background of the dark cloud, he just went into a trance at the age of 7. Murchit ho gaye the. He was brought back to home in an unconscious condition. I mean, these are avatars and great vibhutis. The signs of their impending greatness as spiritual figures, there some signs are evident even quite early. Mother, for example, 5 years ki age mein, she was given that small chair to sit on, and she would sit there and on the top of her head, that energy, the Shakti hai, she would feel that consciousness and that Shakti, and she would try to pull it down. And she would just sit like this and be not interested in games or anything which other children would be interested in. Like examples like this. So, yeah. Yeah. So to take refuge in this and to divine is perfectly in consonance with this teaching. Okay. अब इसमें फिर से आऊंगा. Nay, although the Gita prefers action to inaction. इसके दो श्लोकास हैं which I can 3.8. The quarter is karma jyayo hya karmanah. Action is superior to inaction. And 5.2, tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. Karma yoga is superior to karma sannyasa. That is in 5.2. Okay. So the Gita prefers action to inaction. It does not rule out the renunciation of works, but accepts it as one of the ways to the divine. Now, it might sound a little contradictory. Okay, so far we were just, action, 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 no matter what the action should not stop. And here he is saying that the Gita does not rule out the renunciation of works. Why? Why? Because action or inaction or this or that is not the main thing of the Gita. The main thing for the Gita is God, divine, the eternal, by whatever means to gain entry into that spiritual consciousness and to attain the divine basically. And that is the thing. That is the main thing. And then wo jo word aane wala hai abhi, imperative. That is the word. If that can only be attained by renouncing works and life and all duties, and the call is strong within us, okay, then into the bonfire they must go, and there is no help for it. The call of God is imperative and cannot be weighed against any other considerations. Why it cannot be weighed? Because he is the source. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. It comes in 10.8. I am the origin of everything. I am the source of everything. So naturally, I mean, in that sense, that which is your source, if the call for that is coming, and if you, ignore that or neglect that and follow something else, then the soul within you will dry up. In some cases, it can even leave the body if the life circumstances become very frustrating. Heaven's call is rare. Rare are the heart that heeds. This line is there in Savitri. And यहाँ पे जो word imperative आया है, taking this as an opportunity, yes, 1 second. There is a letter of Sri Aurobindo where he has this phrase, the categorical spiritual imperative. Okay, the categorical spiritual imperative, the absolute need of the soul for the divine. This is a phrase from that letter. I'll share that letter. It's a very beautiful, very powerful, very enlightening letter to Dilip Kumar Roy, wherein he tells basically motives for seeking the divine, why we seek the divine. It can begin in the form of truth. It can begin in the form of even service to the country or this or that. How the divine basically leads us towards himself. Very, very powerful letter. Very, very powerful letter. Right? So in that, again, I'm repeating the categorical spiritual imperative, the absolute need of the soul for the divine. We are all souls. And the most absolute need in all of us is for nothing else but the divine. जब तक वो नहीं प्राप्त होगा, तब तक वो जो absolute need है वो fulfill नहीं होगी. And obviously, I mean, unless that fundamental and absolute need is fulfilled, I mean, nothing can give you satisfaction. वो संतुष्टि जिसको बोलते हैं, complete satisfaction, that can never come except by attainment of the divine. This much for this thing. The counter thing which I wanted to just say, कि Sri Aurobindo is giving here examples, okay? Buddha ka, Vivekananda ka, Sri Ramakrishna ka, but that is where we have to be honest with ourselves. Many people have this tendency of trying to copy Buddha. See, I am as great as Buddha. They have their responsibilities and this and that, but then they will go away thinking, ho jayega kuch bhi. Doesn't work like that. You cannot fake these things. You can cheat everybody else. You cannot cheat your soul. So it has to be, and in the cases in which the need is genuine and the call is imperative, nothing can come in there. It's not a thought out thing. It's just, it comes on a wave of aspiration. It comes on that crest of aspiration, and then you do what you're supposed to do. But basically, not to misuse these great examples. That is just the, disclaimer or this thing I'm giving. Okay. I mean, that was not part of this text, but just I'm saying this just so that, Sri Aurobindo says, okay, this tendency of sannyasa, leaving everything and going to the Himalayas and this and that, this is there totally, I mean, very, very deep rooted and so fundamental to the Indian spirituality and Indian nature. Jara si kuch problem hui and suddenly, okay, we'll go. Yeah. Also not out of Shamshan Vairagya. Correct. So somebody dies and, the detachment or whatever you feel because of it, that is not the right kind of Vairagya. If
But
you mention
Anmol,
Vairagya, yes.
all the three examples that have been given of
Yes.
Buddha, of Sri Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna, all
Yes.
of them, as you just elaborated, what they did to the family. If you see it from the family's point of view, if
Yeah.
you went to Buddha's
Disaster.
parents or his
It looks
wife,
like
or similarly
Vivekananda, for
Vivekananda's
example,
mother,
I'll tell you that part. So Vivekananda, because he's a young and capable man and he's not, earning for his mother and this and that. They were even having difficulty of food at that time. Can you imagine? And he was from I mean, a very prosperous family. His father was a lawyer, Vishwanath Datta. So he prays to Ramakrishna that can you please pray to Mother Kali ki my family will have at least basically what they need. And Ramakrishna assures him that they will never lack basic food and clothing. That assurance is given by Ramakrishna. So Vivekananda had this conflict within him. Ki, what am I doing? I am following this old man who looks a little cranky. I am not able to understand him. But at the same time, the pull towards him is so irresistible. And the kind of love that he's having and the kind of, I mean, Ramakrishna was, what to say? I mean, he was just extraordinary,
पर
extraordinary.
ये घर्षण तो
योगेश
होता
भाई
ही
आपका
है
तो
ना,
पूरा
ये
नहीं हुआ था
घर्षण तो होना ही
सॉरी
है, ये जो
आई
फ्रिक्शन है.
हाँ
yeah, I think the point I was making is that here all the three examples are of vibhutis. This
yes
text is written for the common man to aspire and
yes
have clarity on his
yes
existence, the reason why he's been given a birth, all of us on the
yes
call, right?
yes yes
But the
yes
three examples are people who have reached the goal, whose clarity of communication of the
there
divine
the example is being given off the stage when they have not reached the goal.
informing them that they need to take this.
The example is being given of a turning point in their life where if they had made a wrong decision, they would not have reached the goal. Okay. And their example is being given because, I mean, they became great, great spiritual figures and they followed the spiritual impulse. If, for example, Vivekananda had followed, am I not audible clearly?
Yeah, your voice faded in between, Anmol. We lost. If from the point
Yeah,
you started, it was all
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
now,
Now it's better. Can you repeat, please, if you don't
yeah.
mind?
If you could please
yeah.
repeat. Now it's clear.
Yes. I am saying simply this, that the example is being given of a turning point in their life wherein if they had made the wrong decision, they would not have attained the divine. So what he's trying to highlight here is the importance of following that spiritual impulse when it comes in that categorical and imperative way. This is what Sri
Right,
Aurobindo is.
right.
And
That
I
the
think
central thing in
Anmol,
life is not to, देखिए सीधी बात बोलूं, पेट पालन तो सबका हो ही जाता है, ठीक है. ऐसा कोई ईश्वर, if
बराबर.
God has given birth to you, he is going to make sure
Correct.
that you survive. So
Yes.
all, it's ridiculous to think that I am keeping myself alive, or if I don't earn for my mother or my wife or this or that, they are going to die. It is basically little bit emotionalism. I'm not saying that one should be irresponsible and tamasic, but भगवान दुनिया चला रहे हैं, आप और मैं नहीं चला रहे हैं.
Correct.
You
That
know, that
doership
sort of
should go
thing.
away. That doership should go
Yeah,
away.
even for ourselves. हाय मेरा क्या
Yeah.
होगा? If I stop earning, what will happen to me? What will happen to you?
Nobody is indispensable. बराबर है.
Yeah, nobody is indispensable. And there is a greater and higher power which is doing everything, not you and me. We are not running the world. The world is
And
run by the Shakti,
Yo-
by the
Yogesh
Divine
bhai,
Mother.
Yogesh bhai, if I were to add to what Anmol said, this last paragraph, no, is punctuated with so many conjunctions and so many conditions. We must not take it lightly. And if I mean, and the call is strong, and all the
And the
beauty,
call is strong.
and
Yes. We
वो
can read that
बहुत
sentence again. We can read that
that
sentence
हाँ,
again.
yeah,
Can you please
yeah,
read it? The sentence? Ha.
yeah.
If that can only be attained by renouncing works. Ha. Now here I should say this thing. Oh, Buddha और विवेकानंद का तो मैंने बता दिया कि we don't have to misuse that example. Okay. Why Sri Aurobindo has given that example, that we've also covered. Now, if that can only be attained by renouncing works and life. Now, इसमें क्या होता है? Sometimes you are preconditioned by your past life development to follow a certain path. So you have वो बस आपका टेम्परामेंट या द राइट वर्ड इज एक्चुअली कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. इफ यू आर कॉन्स्टिट्यूटेड दैट वे that you cannot attain him except by renouncing, then you should renounce because it is the divine who is important. गीता के 12th चैप्टर में फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, द फर्स्ट श्लोका, he asks which is better, bhakti or jnana. And jnana in the Gita, that way, wahan pe it implies sort of the renunciation of works. Okay. And Krishna says ki kleshodhikatarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam. Those who follow that kind of path of inactivity and renunciation and pure meditation and all that, they also attain to me, only it is more difficult. The klesha is adhikatara. The difficulty is more, but they also attain to me only, he says. So the point is that if, I mean, from the soul within, from the inner being, the impulse is towards the divine and it is unstoppable, irresistible, then you have to follow that. Let nothing should come in the way of your, flowing towards the divine, going towards him. That impulse towards attaining the divine, it does not come just like that. There is a whole background of lifetimes of sadhana behind that. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyate. Vasudevah sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. 7.19 of the Gita. So, I mean, you're basically, if you have reached that point and then you are again hesitating or dilly-dallying, then you are in a sense, lifetimes of sadhana, you are kind of, sort of wasting in the sense, delaying it. And the hostile forces, I mean, I should not mention such things. They are little scary and negative basically. But the more they can delay the realization, the greater is their happiness and joy. And on the contrary, if one person realizes, I would have shared that quotation from the Life Divine, that if one person attains, then, there is a ripple effect. The divine soul reproduces itself in further liberated souls, just as the animal reproduces itself in further animal bodies. So the liberation of the individual is of the greatest importance in the creation. Nothing is more important than God realization. This is the main point.
So what it's implying is that if you are constantly focused on that eternal reality that we are a divine being and we should be a divine instrument, that means to get the divine in every second of our existence, awake, asleep, in dream state. That is the goal which is directing us towards, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And also, Anmol bhai, if circumstances simulate us to do this,
It's
then it
maybe
is not correct. It is not
एक
correct.
second, जो योगेश भाई ने point बोला, there is a practical point in that. So, the Gita says, Yo mam smarati nityashah, etc. Ki he who remembers me constantly. Now, when you are sleeping, or it's practically, Sri Aurobindo will say this in this book, it is not possible practically to remember all the time. It's not possible. Practically possible nahi. Then what is the solution? The solution is yoga. Of course, smarana is also a form of yoga. Through that yoga, through that offering, through that thinking, through that bhakti, your consciousness starts getting united. And once it starts getting united, there is no need to remember. Then you are in a state of yoga. What Gita calls yogastha. Yogastha kuru karmani. Being stationed in yoga, do works like that. So, that it's a very practical thing. आप कुछ कह रहे थे धवल जी?
नहीं, मैं ये कह रहा था कि if external circumstances act as a stimulant to take a action towards, then one should be cautious against that because it is very, very temporal in nature. But if you wait and really see within yourself, ये अंदर से हो रहा है, and now there is no other way but to do this, then it is a very proper decision. That is what I understand by that last line.
Exactly. Exactly. That is why the absolute necessity of total honesty and total lack of self-deception. Okay, this is what I really want, and it is unfair to my soul and everything if something comes in the way of that. That sort of honesty,
Yeah, no, that
right?
helps. Yeah.
Right. So, do we need to dwell on this paragraph more, or should we move on?
We can move on. If others don't have any.
I think, yeah, I also feel but see, again, these classes are sort of who have not read before, they can read the text for the first time. But I mean, this has to be read on one's own as many times as needed. So that goes without saying. This class is just for, sort of whetting the appetite through discussion, clearing some concepts and all that. But on one's own individual level, I mean, it would be ideal if one can take out the time to read it on one's own. That's all.
Anmol, just one request,
Yes.
here, because you've been a sadhak and an absolute sincere sadhak, is giving a perspective of three, vibhutis. If you could just give a personal reflection on having this goal and kind of being steadfast on it, irrespective of, and constantly being on the path of divine realization, if you could share some perspective of your own, it will be really very insightful for all of us.
I'm not at the level where any of my personal things can be useful to people, honestly speaking. I mean, I can say this much, okay, when I was in the corporate and I had visited ashram and everything, the pull of the samadhi in Pondicherry, that I can say with total honesty, that started becoming very, very strong to the point that if I would enter my corporate premises, I would start feeling suffocated. And because there was attachment to money, there was attachment to career and all that, that kind of tussle which went on for 1.5 to 2 years, it broke my health to some extent. So after only when that health broke and there was no option left except to leave it. And then, I mean, some kind of divine intervention happened that I am not comfortable sharing openly. But basically, the pull of the samadhi, the magnetic attraction of the samadhi, that I started feeling very strongly. And I mean, I can say this much with full honesty that, I feel that the Samadhi in Pondicherry is the home of my soul and that is where it belongs. And, but yes, as I said, it took 1.5, 2 years that even more, I have to think exactly. The world does not leave you. Maya, the hold of it does not leave you so easily. So you have to, I mean, you have to take a plunge somewhere, basically.
Right. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so who would like to read next? Himanshuri, would you like to read?
Not today, Anmolji. No, I won't be able
Okay,
to.
no problem, no problem. Archana ji, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Can you read?
Therefore, is
Would you
it?
like to read?
Yes, I can read.
Okay. So, but here there is this further difficulty.
But here there is this farther difficulty that the action which Arjuna must do is one from which his moral sense recoils. It is his duty to fight, you say. But that duty has now become to his mind a terrible sin. How does it help him or solve his difficulty? To tell him that he must do his duty disinterestedly, dispassionately. He will want to know which is his duty or how it can be his duty to destroy in a sanguinary massacre his kin, his race, and his country. He is told that he has right on his side, but that does not and cannot satisfy him because his very point is that the justice of his legal claim does not justify him in supporting it by a pitiless massacre destructive to the future of his nation. Is he then to act dispassionately in the sense of not caring whether it is a sin or what its consequences may be, so long as he does his duty as a soldier. That may be the teaching of a state, of politicians, of lawyers, of ethical casuists. It can never be the teaching of a great religious and philosophical scripture which sets out to solve the problem of life and action from the very roots. And if that is what the Gita has to say on a most poignant moral and spiritual problem, we must put it out of the list of the world's scriptures and thrust it, if anywhere, then into our library of political science and ethical casuistry.
Yeah, casuist. Thank you. So the tone of Sri Aurobindo continues to be quite strong. What does he say here? Thrust it, if anywhere. उसको बस वहाँ पे. So, but here there is this further difficulty that the action, acha, I'm sorry. The last sentence of the previous paragraph, again, the call of God is imperative and cannot be weighed against any other considerations. Just this sentence can be taken from this book as a guideline for life. The call of God is imperative and cannot be weighed against any other considerations. If we follow this, truly we can arrive at spiritual realization. But here there is this further difficulty that the action which Arjuna must do is one from which his moral sense recoils. Okay, it is his duty to fight, you say, but that duty has now become to his mind a terrible sin. Ghoram karma, ghoram papam, whatever. How does it help him or solve his difficulty to tell him that he must do his duty disinterestedly, dispassionately? Right? Perfect reasoning. He will want to know which is his duty or how it can be his duty to destroy in a sanguinary massacre. Sanguinary means where there is a lot of bloodshed. Sanguine as such means blood red. Okay. Sanguinary massacre his kin, his race, and his country. So, that duty has to be aligned to the divine purpose. The Krishna's aim basically to destroy the bad Kshatriyas, like Parashurama, the previous avatar did, previous. So 21 times he wiped off the Kshatriyas because they had become too tyrannical. Okay. Similarly, Rama, all the Rakshasa kings, okay, a person like Vali, sanguine and sanguinary are very close phonetically. Sanguine, okay, maybe. Okay. So, every time the avatar comes, so politically also there is an objective. In Sri Aurobindo's time, the independence of India, the, beginning of the decline of the British Empire, like that. Because we know what kind of tyranny and what kind of oppression was happening because of that accumulation of power in the wrong hands, right? So he is told that he has right on his side, but that does not and cannot justify him, because his very point is that the justice of his legal claim does not justify him in supporting it by a pitiless massacre destructive to the future of his nation. So that whole idea of duty and what he has to do, kartavyam karma, it has to be now given on a fresh basis of coming from the divine. Like Krishna in the 11th chapter, he says, they are already killed by me. Maya hatan, tvam jahi. You slay them. So they are already killed. वो तो और भी आगे वो तो already there. He's already shown that they are all killed by me. He sees all these warriors entering the mouth of Krishna. Bhishmam च द्रोणम च जयद्रथम च कर्णम तथान्यान अपि ओधवीरान मया हतांस्त्वम जहिमा व्यथिष्ठा युध्यस्व चेतासि रणे sapatnan. This is one of the shlokas, right? I'll share the number later on. 5. So is he then to act dispassionately in the sense of not caring whether it is a sin or what its consequences may be, so long as he does his duty as a soldier? No. That may be the teaching of a state. What is a state? The government or administrative machinery. The state basically, okay? Of politicians, of lawyers. We, sometimes we tend to confuse these things with the divine. of ethical casuists. Like we should not confuse the. So this looks like clash between his duty and morality. Yeah. So yeah, the state is the mechanism for the manifestation of Mother India, let's say. So Mother India, it is who is the goddess, and whatever state functioning is there, whatever state machinery is there, it is her external apparatus or device for functioning. And obviously, I mean, it needs to be perfected more and more. We should not confuse the external this thing with the internal truth and reality. That's my point here, basically. Of politicians of
Can you repeat external? Why you say that? External form with
like, for
internal.
example, Modi ji.
Mahabharati is
Yes,
yeah.
Huh. For example, right now, whatever government we have, we all feel it is very spiritual and fine. Agreed. They are aware of the soul of the country, right? But it is Mother India who is the spiritual reality behind the country. And whatever state mechanism is there, whatever form of government is there. For example, in 1911, Shri Aurobindo wrote, India will pass through the experiment of parliamentary democracy only to realize that this is not suitable for it.
Oh, yeah, the Westminster parliamentary democracy will fail.
Yes.
Right.
मैं exact sentence बता रहा हूँ आपको.
Yeah, India will have to adopt a federated structure. I remember that line similar.
Yes. So what does it mean? That inner reality, that spiritual reality behind the country is obviously divine and true and perfect. But the outer mechanism, the state machinery and all that, that is in a state of evolution. That is in a state of, progressively usko और perfect करना. And we should not confuse the state with the divine entity behind, of which the state is the external mechanism.
Now it makes sense.
This is the point. So, for example, I mean, not to belabor this too much, when we are giving our taxes, okay, so we should not think that we are giving externally to the state, and we should think of the right and wrong about it. Ki, are they honest and all that. But if you can have that spiritual attitude, if you remember that entity behind, then you will be thinking that you are making an offering to a goddess. You are not offering money to a state mechanism. The attitude shift can happen like that. But again, I mean, if the state mechanism is imperfect, okay, then obviously, I mean, one should look ways to save that and spend that same money in one's own way, according to one's own best judgment, like that. Anyway, this is not, मैं थोड़ा estray जा रहा हूँ. I'll come back to the text. That may be the teaching of a state, of politicians, of lawyers, of ethical casuists. So casuists basically, they solve problems of conscience. Okay. Casuistry अगर देखेंगे dictionary में, it means plausible but false reasoning. Casuist comes from the word case. So you have a moral case, you have a case of conscience, and they solve that. That is where the word comes from. But dictionary, plausible but false. Plausible but false reasoning. It looks very true, but it is meant to serve a certain motive and purpose. It is not totally disinterested or impersonal. It has a negative connotation. Casuistry, plausible but false reasoning. अपना काम निकालने के लिए एक reasoning दे देना कि चलो ऐसे करा लो. So, that sort of thing. It can never be the teaching of a great religious and philosophical scripture, which is what the Gita is. One of the greatest religious and philosophical scriptures, now, my goodness, which sets out to solve the problem of life and action from the very roots. What an assurance here. Okay, if we understand the Gita, the problem of life is solved. The Gita is giving solution to the problem of life. And from its roots, the roots are the spiritual. Urdhva Moolam, Urdhva means the Bhagavan being up. The roots are above.
15th chapter. Yeah.
Yes, 15th chapter, verse number 1. Right? Once again, I'll repeat the sentence. It can never be the teaching of a great religious and philosophical scripture which sets out to solve the problem of life and action from the very roots. Not some, it's the deepest teaching basically. That's why it takes time to go inside and seep inside. Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam. It comes in the 10th chapter, Vibhuti Yoga. Among the Vidyas, among the knowledge or the sciences, I am the knowledge of spirituality. So you have to read and reread and apply and reapply your mind, meditate and think and contemplate and discuss argument, counter argument like that. That also helps. That does not help ultimately. What helps ultimately, as mother says, is quietude. You become quiet and let the illumination arise from within. That is what ultimately what helps. But all these things, they are steps on the way. And that is why it takes time. उसमें एक basic stabilization आने में भी it can take time. It requires a great deal of patience. One of the great words of the Upanishads, Sri Aurobindo says, is dhira. Dhira. They were dhira. They were very patient.
Patient.
Yes, and they were not satisfied until they reached the root. Yasmin vijnate sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati. I want to know that by knowing which everything else is known. This comes in the Mundak Upanishad in the form of question. Sorry. Shaunaka says to this thing. Kasmin nu vijnato bhagwan sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati iti. What is that, O venerable Lord or whatever, Bhagavan? What is that by knowing which everything that is becomes known? Kasmin no vijnato Bhagavan sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati iti. So
Anmol bhai, you know
a
what?
great deal of perseverance is required for that. Yes, we're
What you
almost
just said,
by the end of
we-
time. Yeah.
But what you just made I mean, makes a lot of sense, because this is a pattern. At least I've seen it in my life, that there are periods of struggle, and there are periods of quietude where because when you've exhausted everything, right? Then you sit quietly. Until then, there is this effort which I feel is required from
Yes.
my side to do it.
It is required. It is required.
So until I don't exhaust the possibility and I give
Remember
up.
always, karma jyayo hyakarmanaha. Action
Huh,
is better than inaction. That
correct.
kind of quietness can come only when the sattva guna has developed to a certain extent.
Yeah.
You cannot
So
get that real quietude in tamas. You will get only the false kind of quietude, inertia basically.
no, I'm not talking
That is
of that kind of
inertia.
quietude, because after that Rajasic fight of
Yes.
exhausting yourself, then
Yes.
then you yourself attain to that state of quietude where
Yes.
answer just comes automatically.
Exactly.
So I'm reminded of that line from Hour of God. There are periods where,
Yes.
a little sacrifice going up the heaven calls
Yes.
down the rain of God's bounty. But
Boundary.
there are periods where, there is a significant effort, but you don't see any this thing.
Please share that text on the group, Dhaval bhai.
हाँ
And
हाँ हाँ
mother's
हाँ
reading of it. I mean, mother's
हाँ
reading of it, I can also locate.
हाँ है मेरे पास है. I'll do that.
Okay,
Yeah, text
please share
I'll
that.
share, and also
It will
probably
be
the
it's one of the most amazing texts and
yeah
recordings from Sri Aurobindo and Mother.
yeah.
We'll just finish this paragraph 9.1.
Sure. Yeah.
And if that is what the Gita has to say, that माने क्या कि simply अपना duty करो as a soldier. There is no higher thing being given, no higher enlightenment. If that is what the Gita has to say on a most poignant moral and spiritual problem, poignant means sharp. Okay, poignant भी pronounce करते हैं. I mean, anyway. And if that is what the Gita has to say on a most poignant moral and spiritual problem, we must put it out of the list of the world's scriptures, capital S, and thrust it, if anywhere, then into our library of political science and ethical casuistry. So then it is not a Adhyatma Shastra, Yoga Shastra. It is a Rajnitika Shastra, political science, and ethical casuistry. I mean, I told what the meaning of casuistry is, but basically, this is not what the Gita is. This is Sri Aurobindo's style of writing to drive his point home. Okay, the Gita aims to solve the problem of life and action from the very roots. That is why he begins by saying, expressing his despair and total whatever. He does not ask, and Krishna begins right from the start. You are grieving for that for which there is no need to grieve, and you talk like a pandit. And then, there was never a time when I was not there or you were not there, or these kings of men were not there, and there will never be a time when I will not be, or you will not be, or these kings will not be. So he starts from the highest. He starts from basically the very roots of existence.
But Anmol, by this clash of identities
Yeah.
of an individual, as you mentioned, I'm taking you back
Yes.
to your definition
Yes,
of
yes, 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 yes.
So it's very important, because see, we play different roles in
For
life.
some people were not there in the beginning. So the sentence which I had said was, the decision of duty will come from the decision of identity. What you have to do, that will come from what you think you are. So, and in that, the fundamental and true identity is that I am an eternal portion of the eternal. 15.7 of the Gita, Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhutah Sanatana. Yes, Dhavalji. I was
So
just, yeah.
no, that's good because it can
Yeah.
act as a connector. So what
Yeah.
I'm saying is this here, if you look, he's talking about Ghoram sin in this paragraph, right?
Yeah.
Sin and sanguinary massacre. And
Hmm.
so, but on one side, he is identified with his duty. On the other side, he's identified with morality, papa,
Yeah.
good, bad. So
Yeah, I know.
each person has this, including myself.
Yeah, yeah,
Eh,
everybody,
every
everybody.
so this is identity clash. तो अब जाएं कहाँ हम यहाँ से?
जाएं
तो
कहाँ मतलब क्या? We have to
मतलब नहीं,
apply
इसीलिए
ourselves to
इसीलिए
yoga and
no no
try to
no
function as much as possible from the highest identity.
correct. So that is where most of us, I mean, at least it's a struggle even to lucky was Arjuna that Shri Krishna was to guide him.
No, we are
But
not less lucky. We are having Sri Aurobindo. We are having
हाँ
essays on the Gita. We
correct
are,
नहीं पर
Aurobindo has given everything.
हाँ
Nothing.
है
And by the way, in Arjuna's time, the descent of the supermind had not happened. Don't forget. The
no
mission of
I'm
Sri Aurobindo's life was to bring down the supermind. And
yeah
that having taken place, spiritual progress and all that is much faster than it was 5,000 years ago.
true no I'm not denying
No,
neither
no,
I'm
no. I'm just
saying
because many times we tend to forget this important point because वो दिखता नहीं है ना तो हम सोचते हैं कि इतना मुश्किल है and that is why actually the it should not be too much emphasized कि how much yoga is so difficult, adhyatma is so
नहीं नहीं
difficult.
नहीं नहीं
And
नहीं
that
नहीं
tends to make a little bit of a
नहीं
the life and work of Shri Aurobindo and Mother. It gets मतलब not mockery but not able to find the right word.
but हम
वो
जैसे
diminish हो जाता है,
कनेक्टेड हैं
dilute हो जाता है, undermine हो जाता है.
हम
They
जैसे
have achieved a
कनेक्टेड हैं
lot. They have achieved a lot.
no I don't disagree see I'm
Yeah, yeah.
talking हम जैसे लोग कनेक्टेड है तो हम
9-5.
ये भी उठाते हैं ये गीता
Yes.
पढ़ के भी उठाएंगे we'll retrospect a lot
Yeah.
go deep within but
Yeah.
this problem is not a difficult I mean it's not an easy one to solve
No, 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 no. It's not
it's
easy.
a big clash because when I
Yeah.
am having a clash within my identity, first of all, I am a disorder. And that's
Exactly.
exactly that disorder has been explained by Sri Aurobindo very elaborately in the earlier chapters. So
Exactly.
I can see that situation. So and I think at least I have to
Mother gives a solution for this. Wonderful. I'll
uh,
slightly humorous also I'll share.
uh,
So in the late 60s, all these second two world wars they had seen and Cold War
uh,
was going on and everything. So they started this organization called World Union in Pondicherry. They still have an office. And so they asked the mother for a message. And the idea is obviously, to unite the world. Auroville uske liye bana. But they
uh.
asked the mother for a message for World Union. She said, first unify the different parts of your own being. And
Correct.
what she says is कि वही ना जो हमारी identity क्या है according to mother that we are the psychic being, we are a portion of the eternal, an eternal portion of. So to organize our whole personality, our whole being around the psychic, centered around the psychic. That is
Correct.
unify the different parts of our being, integrate them, all these words around the psychic. That is the work of the sadhak. And to the extent that yes, Yogesh ji.
So yeah, Anmol, the point that you made, this beautiful line that it's really the highlight of today's session, that Gita is the scripture which sets out to solve the problem of life and action from the very root.
From the very roots.
So the fact that it talks about the action, and as you said, action is dependent on the identity from where we are operating. If we are able to take life as every second the journey of what we are experiencing, which is different for all of us on the call, the action, is it being driven by the ego consciousness, which is where our identity is, or do we bring the yoga of the spiritual reality essence?
So,
that is what will give us the way forward.
First things first, 7th chapter में आता है, most of our actions, they are driven by some kind of ego because our whole nature is bound by the threads of ego. Okay, without ego, it will all वो बिखर जाएगा. So egoism and ego is shot through the whole human nature. So to completely overcome ego, it happens at a very high stage. First thing one should remember this. One can flatter oneself into thinking that I am so less egoistic and all, like Sri Aurobindo uses this humorous phrase in one of his letters, but then constantly congratulating oneself by saying, "Oh, what a great one am I." Okay. See, I am so unegoistic. This can be an ego. मेरे में तो बिल्कुल अहंकार नहीं है. I am so unegoistic. So, but yes, I mean, once, obviously, I mean, for people on this call who are for many years trying to, so naturally, by the process of yoga, that ego starts getting replaced progressively by the psychic being. What has to happen? This clarity should be there. This should not be missed. Okay, the ego has either to abdicate the throne or it has to be thrown away. या तो वो अपनी मर्जी से छोड़ दे सिंहासन को and let the true ruler, the psychic being, sit there, or otherwise it has
Beautiful.
to be thrown away. But it has to be thrown away. And through the process of yoga and fast, most fast, it happens through bhakti. Through bhakti, again, that can also lead to different kind of egos. I mean, we need not go there. Okay, all the different forms that the ego can take.
Anmol bhai, I remember Alok Das famous dialogue:
Uh,
replace EOS by DOS.
okay, what is
Ego,
that?
ego operating system by divine operating system. It's a
Okay.
wonderful statement.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the replacement of the ego by the psychic being. So, and I mean, it happens gradually. There might be periods when you become so exasperated with yourself because you are feeling your ego so acutely कि यार मेरे अंदर तो इतना कर्तृत्व का भाव है, लग रहा है मैं ये इतना ज्यादा हो रहा है, इसको कैसे हटाऊं. एंड देन ऑब्वियसली बिकॉज ऑफ दैट, यू नो I mean, that aspiration, the descent happens or that Shakti helps you and you make a progress. So it's a process. One has to be patient. That word dhira, very important word. If I not if I'm not remembering wrongly, what Sri Aurobindo says is that what was called rishi in the Vedic phase of spirituality, it was called dhira in the Upanishadic phase. So it's a very important word, धीर, patience, perseverance. ध का मतलब होता है पकड़ के रखना. That is what the sound ध means essentially, to hold basically.
And
So
Anmol, this word life here, the scripture which sets out to solve the problem of life, do we
yes,
interpret life as whatever we are experiencing, like what I'm
yes,
experiencing? All of
yes,
us on this call are
yes, full life.
experiencing life differently,
Yes, yes, the
right?
problem of life, whatever, I mean, whatever in life that we are not able to understand, whatever in life as a whole, which we find imperfect, whatever we find disgusting, even everything. The problem of life, it's a very important phrase. I am glad you said it, articulated it like this. It's the highlight of the session. The Gita sets out to solve the problem of life and action from the very roots. This is the promise of the Gita. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, the blessing to have such a thing, such an assurance from somebody as reliable as Sri Aurobindo himself. If I apply myself to it, the problem of life is solved. Our life is a paradox with God for key, Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri. And you have to find that God within yourself. Until and unless it is found, the paradox of life is not solved. Right?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
And
So should we close? It's already we have shot past 6-7 minutes. We'll just be silent for half a minute and then close. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's meet on Monday. Maybe for the chanting, we'll meet on Sunday evening. That I'm not sure actually, but okay.